right. So you guys enjoying the decorations throughout the building? Let's give it up for our team that decorated the whole building. Just to be clear, those right now, those are actually Thanksgiving decorations. And we're gonna repurpose them next week to celebrate Christmas. But I hope you're enjoying them. There were people here for hours and hours yesterday just really making some magic happen. So hope you enjoy that. If you're new here, my name is Lou. I'm one of the pastors here. I am so glad that you're here. Today, we're wrapping up a series called Dealing with Doubt. It's the end of a longer series, so it might feel like you're kind of tuning in at the end of the program here, but I'll bring you up to speed so that you won't be lost. So here's how we'll start out. Over the last few weeks, we've been starting with a little exercise in uncertainty, and they've been fun, and it gets us kind of moving a little bit, and so we're going to do that again. I'll give you a statement, and you'll have the chance to vote on whether or not you think it's true or false, okay? Gets you feel a little bit of uncertainty here. So here's the first one, okay? You ready? You don't have to play if you don't want to, but some people have to so that I'm not left here all on my own. All right, first one. Sea otters hold hands while they're sleeping. If you think that's true, raise your hand. If you think that's false, raise your hand. Okay, all right. That is true. Yeah, that's give it up for the sea otters. So it's like the Notebook. Okay, second one. In 1923, there was a zookeeper who taught his tigers to celebrate feeding time by touching paws in 1923. And this was how the high five was invented. If you think that's true, raise your hand. If you think that's false, raise your hand. That is false. But come on, that would be cool, right? Okay, last one. You and I are more likely to die on our birthday than any other day of the year. All right, a little morbid, sorry. If you think that's true, raise your hand. If you think that's false, raise your hand. Okay, that is true. That's true, yeah. Statistically, it's when you're most likely to die. I think it's because of things like partying and stress and there's a bunch of different factors which make it a little bit more likely than other days of the year. Okay, now, unless you're an expert on all of those random things, my guess is that at some point you were feeling a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of like, I wonder, right? Unless you're an expert in all of those different things, which I think none of us are. We call that doubt. We've defined doubt over the past few weeks as the feeling of uncertainty. It can be a lot or a little. It can be like if you look at it like it's on a spectrum here, we've got disbelief, which is false completely and I'm totally certain of it, or belief, like true, absolutely, yes, and I'm certain of it. These are both places of relative certainty, right? If that's true, then everything in between, like I don't know, probably not, that's all the land of doubt. That's where doubt lives. Now, we've said over the last few weeks, in life, doubt's a helpful thing, right? It is helpful to lean into your uncertainty with the hope of getting to one side or the other. If a stranger invites you to come take a ride in their car and you're not sure, you should lean into that and ask some questions because you want to be either sure it's safe or sure it's not safe, right? You want to lean into that to get to a place of certainty. That's a helpful thing. If you're going to go walk out on a frozen pond this winter, you should lean into your uncertainty. If you're not sure that ice can hold you, you should think about how cold it's been, how thick is the ice, all that stuff. It's helpful. We recognize in life when you're not sure, ask some questions, lean into it. But the emotions get a little hairy when we bring that idea of uncertainty or doubt to church. A lot of us have been made to feel guilty or we feel shame whenever we've got some feelings of uncertainty about God or anything that relates to church or God or Jesus or religion. There are some weird emotions. And so the problem with that is we are forced to exist as if this middle place doesn't exist. And that becomes an issue because it teaches us, either directly or indirectly, that you've got to believe it all or you can't believe at all. And so if somebody kind of rattles a belief that you have, rather than kind of moving a little bit further, like maybe you're at like a yes and you're like totally into it, rather than going to like, and just taking a step or two back, it may be enough to knock you all the way into the place of unbelief, where it's like, hey, if I can't believe this thing, I can't believe any of it, right? Or maybe you're somebody who doesn't go to church and you're here today for the first time because you're not sure about this, and you would say, no, I'm here right now. And if that's you, we're glad you're here. But maybe the reason why you haven't stepped in the direction of belief is because you've been forced to function like this middle area doesn't exist. In other words, you think in order to take a step, you got to take a leap all the way over there. You got to go from believing none of it to believing all of it, just like that. And so over the past few weeks, we've been asking, like, what if we made room for doubt? What if we leaned into our doubt? And we've been looking at some of the teachings of Jesus and some of his followers, and what we've seen is that they lean into their doubt. They embrace their doubt. On week 1, Jesus talked about someone he called the greatest of all time. It was actually someone he was related to. It was a guy named John the Baptist, who had a reputation for being a person of great faith. And in a season of doubt, at his absolute lowest, Jesus spoke so highly of him. And what we said that week was that your doubts don't discredit your faith, which is probably the most important point, probably the most important week of the series. Because if that's true, if your doubts don't discredit your faith, then you have the freedom, we said, to admit your doubts. Don't pretend. Admit your doubts. Everyone say admit. Ready? Admit. Good. Admit your doubts. You can be real about it. You don't have to pretend. Then on week 2, we looked at a group of people who heard the teachings of Jesus. They didn't believe them. And then they went home, studied, looked for answers. And because of their doubt, because they leaned into their doubt, they actually came out believing. And so we said on week 2, engage your doubts. Lean into them. If you got questions, ask your questions. And you might find that you end up at a place of belief. Then on week 3, Tom was up here and he talked about the importance of learning to trust the plan learning to trust the planner rather than the plan, right? Learning to put your confidence in the person of Jesus rather than a specific outcome, which is huge when it comes to learning to trust God. And then last week, we looked at another story where someone takes a huge step of faith, and they immediately encounter obstacles. Everyday, practical, understandable obstacles. And last week we said, expect your doubts. Like anytime you take a step in the direction of faith, you're gonna run into an obstacle, a challenge. And so expect it, be ready for it. Everyone say expect, ready? Good, very nice. Okay, so we're closing the series this week, and we're landing at a place that I think is important, especially as we conclude this whole thing. And here's why. So when I was in high school, I played basketball, and I was a decent basketball player in high school. I played point guard. The point guard is the person that kind of starts the play, calls the play, runs the play. And I did that not because I was anything special, but because I was the shortest guy on the team, and that's who plays point guard. But I played in high school, and one day, the football coach approached me and said, hey, we don't have a backup quarterback for the team, and we need a quarterback for the JV team. You call the plays on the basketball court. Maybe it's kind of like the same thing, and you can do it on the football field. Why don't you come play football? And so I said, yeah, sure. And I decided to play football that year. And I think pretty quickly, both of us realized that was a really bad idea. One, because I didn't have a good arm. I couldn't throw the ball very far or accurately. And two, what I did not realize is that I couldn't see over the offensive linemen. And it makes sense now, like most quarterbacks, especially in the NFL, they're really tall. It's because you have to see over the offense. I didn't know that. Couldn't see what was going on the field. But it's fine because I didn't play much anyway. I remember the first time I was put in the game, in a varsity game. I was terrified. I was given the play. I was told where all the receivers were going to go. I called the play in the huddle. We got out there. And I had different options. But because I was so nervous, because I was so flustered, I knew there was one place I was going. There was one guy. We had a receiver. His name was Mitch. He was 6'3". He was fast. He was strong. He was aggressive. He had enormous hands. I knew like the ball, it doesn't matter what happens, the ball is going in that direction because I've got the best chance of something good happening if we go in the direction of Mitch. And so we snapped the ball, I dropped back, I couldn't see him. I didn't know where he was, I just knew where he was supposed to be. I basically closed my eyes and let it fly. And he caught it. And it was great, I was thrilled. The play didn't matter. I wouldn't have been in the game if the play mattered, but I was happy he caught the ball. It's funny, actually. The first service today, the 8:30 service, a guy I went to high school with who was one of the other wide receivers was at the service. He texted me after the service. He goes, "I was open." Couldn't see him, so. So with this whole idea of like faith and doubt, the reason I'm telling you that story is like, is there a play to run when you've done all the other things? When you've looked at all the other options? Maybe you're trying it, right? Maybe you're admitting your doubts, you're trying to engage your doubts, you're expecting your doubts, you're learning to trust the plan or not the plan. Like, but is there like, okay, life's crazy. Is there just someone I can throw to? Is there a play I can run, something that's got the best chance of me getting through this season of doubt or through this doubt that I'm facing? I think there is. And we see it in the life of one of Jesus's closest followers who went through a really difficult season of doubt. His name was Thomas. He's known as Doubting Thomas. If you've ever heard that name, this is that guy, which is kind of sad for him because he did a lot of really cool things. For most of his life, he was faithful, courageous Thomas, but he had this one episode, and so he got stuck with a nickname. Thomas followed Jesus faithfully for 3 years. And at that time, because Jesus was literally physically traveling, Thomas had to give up his livelihood to go follow Jesus. It required a lot of sacrifice. There was a lot of learning. He was challenged over and over and over again, but he made tremendous progress over the course of 3 years. But if you know the story, you know about 3 years into it, things took a pretty dramatic turn. Things were going really well. Jesus was growing in popularity. People were listening to his teachings. They were following him around. But all of a sudden, things turned. And eventually, he was sentenced to death. Now, he told his followers pretty early on that this was going to happen. He said he was going to die. And he tried to prepare them for it. But when it happened, nobody was ready. He was killed on a cross. He had nails put through his hand. He had a spear put in his side. Like they wanted to see if he was still alive when he was hanging there. So they stuck a spear in his side just to make sure he was dead. And when he died, this movement that had gotten so much momentum, it died with him. It ended. Like there have been movements throughout human history where a leader starts something and then the leader is killed and the followers are like, let's keep the movement going. This was not that story. As soon as Jesus died, his followers went into hiding because they were afraid that the same thing was going to happen to them. The ones who were fishermen like went fishing again. Like when he died, that was it. Because he claimed to be the heart of the movement. So if he was going to die, there's nothing to do anymore. But if you know the story, on Easter Sunday, Jesus came back. He rose from the dead, just like he said he was going to. And he meets with these followers, and this is where we pick up the story. When he meets with them for the first time. This is recorded by John, who was one of those followers who was with Jesus for 3 years leading up to this. It says, on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together, those original followers, they're all together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders. They were afraid that the same thing that happened to Jesus was going to happen to them. They locked the doors. They're not bold, courageous movement people. They're scared. Jesus came and stood among them. Like he's in the room. They thought he was dead, and all of a sudden, he's in the room with them, and he says, peace be with you. Like, this is the formal religious greeting. He's saying, hey, it's okay. It's okay. Which, P.S., if you die and you come back from the dead and show up among people that think you're dead, this is a great way to start the conversation. Like, hey, it's okay. after he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed, thrilled when they saw the Lord. Remember that. Remember that. Now, the story continues. Now, Thomas, one of the 12, one of those original 12 disciples, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. Like, man, that's a bummer. If there's one thing you don't want to miss, it's the return of Jesus after he's risen from the dead, right? Like, we don't know where he went. He probably went out to get milk or something, but he's gone, and I'm sure this is frustrating. So, the other disciple, Jesus shows up for a little while, apparently moves on, leaves, we don't know, but he left to go do something else. And they say to Thomas when he comes back, hey, guess who showed up while you were gone? We have seen the Lord. They're overjoyed because they've seen Jesus come through on what he's said. Thomas, not overjoyed. He's frustrated and confused. And he says to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side. Unless I see that, he says, I will not believe. Now, if we're like looking at that scale of belief and unbelief, right, or unbelief and belief, Thomas he's not really doubting. He's pretty much just not believing. This is like a flat out rejection with a condition, but it's a rejection. It's like, no, I don't believe it, and I won't believe it. They're overjoyed. It's working for them. It's not working for him. But the story continues. We're told a week later, his disciples are in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, ready? Here's some familiar language. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he turns his gaze over to Thomas, and he says to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. This is literally the word not believing. He's saying stop not believing and believe. Like here's what you asked for. And so Thomas replies, of course. Like what is he going to say? He says, of course. My Lord and my God. He sees what he needed to see. Then Jesus told him, because you've seen me, you believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Then John kind of sums up his biography about Jesus and this story with this little concluding part of his whole book, right? This is the end. It's the end of chapter 20. There's one more part. It's like he forgot one more thing. But he's summarizing everything that's been written in his book. And he says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. Like other things happened too. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. In other words, he's telling us, like here's the story of Thomas, here's some other stories too. These are written so that you can believe. Like here's an example to follow if you're someone who wants to believe. So that's the story. And I hear that story, and my question is, what's the play? Right? Like what's the thing to do? What do I walk away with? What exactly was written so that I can believe? What's the example to follow here? Here's a guy, Thomas, who's wrestling with doubt. If I'm wrestling with doubt, I do what Thomas does. What is that exactly? It seems to me like Thomas gives him an ultimatum, right? Like, unless you do this, I won't believe. Here are the terms and conditions of my belief. Unless Jesus shows up and does this, I'm not on board. It's like he puts himself, it seems like he puts himself in the driver's seat and decides he's going to call the shots. And Jesus, now it's up to Jesus. He can either do what Thomas says or Thomas is not on board. So is that like what's happening here? Is that the play to run? Is that the place to throw the ball? You're not sure what to do. Do you just just crank it up? Like just turn on the heat. Okay, here are the conditions of my belief. When I was younger, I told you I liked to play basketball. And I can remember distinctly praying as a young child that I would wake up and be super tall. And I even like kind of worked out the details with God. Like part of this whole thing was, okay, I know I can't just pray and wake up super tall. Otherwise, everyone's going to be like, well, what happened? Why are you so super tall? Then I have to tell them, okay, I said this prayer. And then everyone would want to be super tall. And then God would be like, well, now I have to do it for everybody else. So I was just thinking, it's fine. You make me super tall, but then just erase everyone else's memory so they think I was always this tall. Like I worked out the details and I was so excited about it. I wasn't sure whether that was going to happen. It didn't, in case you haven't figured that out. So maybe I should have just cranked up the heat and just been like, all right, unless I grow a lot, I'm not going to believe. Ball's in your court. Like if I'm following Thomas's example, it seems like that maybe is the play to run. And I'm joking, obviously, but maybe you've heard different versions of this story that are not funny. Or maybe it's part of your story and it's not funny. Like maybe it's not, I want to wake up and be 7 feet tall. Maybe it's, unless you heal this person that I love, I will not believe. Or maybe it's, unless I finally get this job, I will not believe. Or maybe it's, unless I finally find the person I'm looking for, I will not believe. Unless I get into that school, I will not believe. Like maybe you've got your own terms and conditions. Maybe you've done that. And maybe your faith crumbled because he didn't. Like he didn't meet your ultimatum. So what do we do here? What's the example to follow? Is Thomas just getting special treatment because he happened to be really close with Jesus? This is why it's so important to understand verses in the Bible in light of the rest of the things that Jesus said, right? In fact, sometimes people ask why we don't put the little verse number next to the verse chapter there. And the reason is because I'd love for you to just go read the whole chapter on your own. But we can get into trouble when we just take out little bits and pieces and miss the whole picture. So this happened with Jesus and his followers about 11 days earlier, like 3 days before Jesus came back. He sat down with them and he had a meal with them. And at that meal, we call it the Last Supper. It was his final meal with his closest friends. And he taught them a lot. He told them a lot of what was about to happen. He was trying to prepare them for the fact that he was going to be arrested, that he was going to die, and that he was going to come back. And at that dinner, he said he was going to be gone for a little while. And then after a little while, he'd come back. And they would experience joy. It would be hard. They would grieve, but they would experience joy when he came back. And they don't understand. They've got all these questions. They're like, what does he mean by a little while? And then he's like, okay, you're asking all these questions. And he goes into it and explains it even further. But he most clearly says it at the end of chapter 16 here. He says, now is your time of grief. I'm about to die, but I will see you again. And you will rejoice. And no one will take away your joy. Do you remember what John said? I read it before. Remember what John said happened when Jesus showed up the first time when Thomas wasn't there? It says, we'll put it back up here. It says, the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. John's saying, look, guys, like he's connecting the dots. They're saying, Jesus did what he said he would do. He made them a promise at that meal, and he's come through on his promise. He came through for all of them except the one who wasn't there. There was one of them who had not yet seen him and was still wrestling with feelings of confusion. There was one of them who didn't have the joy that they had, because for one of them, Jesus didn't do what he said he was going to do. Or we could say for Thomas, who wasn't there, there was something Jesus said he would do, and he had yet to come through. Or we could say there was something Jesus said would be true. You're going to see me again, and you'll experience joy, and no one will take that joy. But Thomas had not yet seen that to be true. For Thomas, Jesus hadn't followed through with what he said. It was not an ultimatum. Thomas was not giving Jesus an ultimatum. Thomas is waiting for Jesus to follow through on his promise. And so this is where we need to be careful, right? Sometimes, especially in the church world, sometimes people will say, this is what I want from God, or this is what God has to do, and I'm going to trust him enough for it. And then he doesn't do that, and your faith falls out from under you. And maybe it's because of stories like this, understood apart from the original promise that Jesus made. Like, what I'm trying to say is we have to be careful that we're not trusting God to come through on promises that he never made to us. Thomas was told Jesus was going to see him again. And so he's still in this season of doubt. What does he do? What's the play that he runs while he's waiting? Before I tell you, is it possible that for you, at the source of your doubt, is it possible that there was something Jesus said would be true, and you have not yet seen it to be true? And maybe that's at the source of your doubt. And it's not that he's going to show up and show you the holes in his hands, because he didn't say that to us. But he did say some other things. Right? Like maybe you were told you could have peace if you prayed for it. And you prayed, but there's no peace. Or maybe you're told that you could have joy, but there's no joy. Or maybe you were told you could have hope, but there's something about it that hasn't quite sunk in. Or you were told that if you connected with some other people, if you're open your life up to some other people, you would grow together in community because iron sharpens iron, but it's not happening, and there's no chemistry in your group, and there's something you were told would be true, but you just haven't seen it. You were told God could take your horrible circumstances and use them for good, but you're like, where? And that's at the source of your doubt. There's something he said would be true, and you just haven't seen it to be true. Just like Thomas. And so, what do you do? What's the play to run? What does Thomas do? I read it before. It says, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. A week later. All of them went from intense confusion and disappointment to being overjoyed. Thomas is still intensely confused and disappointed, and he keeps showing up among these people who are overjoyed. For an entire week. And can you just imagine what that was like? They get it, he doesn't. And maybe you've been there before. There's other people that are like, yeah, I believe this, and I feel so this, and I love this, and you're just like, yeah, good for you, not for me. I just haven't seen it to be true yet. Right? That's what he's been going through for days, and yet he comes back day after day after day after day. It's really as simple as that. Thomas keeps showing up in spite of his doubt. He brings his doubt, his emotions, his baggage, his hurt feelings, his disappointment, and he shows up among these people that are overjoyed, that seem to get it. And that I'm convinced is the play for us. Maybe there's something that you've been told is true, and for you, you just haven't seen it to be true. What do? You just keep showing up. You just keep showing up. And because Thomas keeps showing up, Jesus shows up. In other words, don't quit on your doubts. Don't quit on your doubts. And maybe showing up for you, maybe it's as simple as showing up to church, literally physically showing up to church. Maybe things were starting out really well, and then it was boom, and something happened. And it got complex, and it got hairy, and it hurts, and it's hard. And so there's this part of you that wants to pull away. I'm sure Thomas didn't want to be with the people that were continuing to just celebrate in their joy. But he kept showing up. Keep showing up. Keep showing up until the light turns on. Keep showing up until Jesus shows up. Or maybe it's not literally coming to church. Maybe it's your prayers. Maybe you're trying to pray on your own, and you're told okay, if you start to pray, this will happen, and this will happen. You'll start to grow, and you're yeah, I'm just not seeing it. What do? You just keep doing it. Just keep showing up. Don't quit on your doubts. Maybe it's in a group. You were told you're gonna grow in a group and it's gonna feed your faith like nothing else, and you tried it, and then there's the person that dominates the conversation, and like there's some awkwardness, there's no chemistry. Like, what do you just keep showing up, stick with it, join another group the next, like just keep showing up. And I have seen this work so beautifully, and I have seen the exact opposite. Like, I have seen the story over and over again of people who are there. Something happens in life. Maybe they get stuck in their thoughts. Maybe something happens relationally. Maybe something happens in their circumstances. But their faith plummets and they hit a valley of doubt. But they just keep showing up, and they're real. They don't pretend. They admit it. They're like, I'm just not there, but I'm not going to stop showing up. I'm not emotionally. I'm not where I want to be. Spiritually, I'm not where I want, but I'm just going to keep showing up over and over and over again. And then you see it, and the light goes on. And it's like Jesus shows up and is like, here. And it makes sense. And they're at a place they wouldn't be if they had quit along the way. But I've seen the exact opposite. I've seen people over and over and over again. It's like going so well, and then something happens. And instead of just like showing up and being real, like, I don't even want to be here right now, they go the other way. And it's like, oh, what happened to them? Where'd they go? And you hear something happened, or they're questioning something, and you see them less and less and less and less, and the story is a different story. Thomas's story would have been radically different if he didn't keep showing up, if he quit on his doubts. The beautiful thing about this story, yet again, is that we get to see another side of Jesus because Thomas doubted, right? We see that Thomas didn't quit on Jesus, but Jesus didn't quit on Thomas. He showed up. He went back for the one, which is consistent with the way that Jesus operates. Over and over and over again, we see him show concern for the one. And maybe that's the thing you need to hear today. Like, in the hairiness of your situation and your doubt, like, Jesus, he goes back for you.
Hey, this is Lou. Thanks for listening. I hope that this was helpful for you in some way. So a lot of people don't know this, but Community Church is completely supported by the generous donations of people like you and me. And if you'd like to join that community of financial supporters, you can go to communitychurch.net/give, or you can give anytime on our church app. And so thanks for being part of this community, whether it's locally or from a distance. Thanks for investing in your faith. And thanks for being part of something that's bigger than yourself. Hope to see you soon.